Um, we will do a presentation to begin with, so please keep yourself muted, and then at the end of the session, we will have time for a Q&A. Our presenter today is Sandeep Podar, and I'll go ahead and pass this over to him.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Today, we will discuss the changes in the new version of ISO 27001 standard and look at the 27002 reference document, which will be very helpful to you in upgrading your ISMS. Let's take a moment to review the agenda. We are going to review the ISO 27001 standard released in October and the supporting reference document 27002 that was released earlier this year. We will go over the changes in the requirements, which are the management clauses 4 to 10, and then the changes in the Annex A controls. Some controls are new, some controls are merged, and some have updated wording. Something new and helpful is the addition of attributes that can be applied to each control to make the implementation easier. After looking at the changes in 27001, I will provide a summary of the reference document 27002 and how you can utilize it. The 002 document is immensely helpful, and I cannot stress enough that your upgrade implementation will be made easier if you use this reference. Let's begin with 001. Note that there's a title change to include cybersecurity and privacy protection to accommodate the cloud controls and the data privacy controls. Here's a comparison of the new and the old titles. Now let's look at the life cycle of this standard. The main version was 2013, and there were minor updates in 2014, 2015, and a European update in 2017. Those minor updates were used differently in different countries, resulting in certificate discrepancies across the globe. The new release of 27001 in 2022 withdraws all previous releases. This eliminates the confusion and the variation in the printed certificates around the world. Opening the standard, you will notice a change in the table of content levels. The number of levels shown in the table of contents have changed from 2 to 3. This aligns better with other ISO standards such as 9001. So if you have integrated implementation of QMS and ISMS, this makes it a tad bit easier. There are changes in the management clauses numbered 4 to 10. Next few slides cover the changes in these mandatory requirements. Some of these changes may not impact your implementation or audit. However, I have included all changes for completeness. This slide shows the changes in clause 4. 4.2. There is a new subbullet C that ties the identification of interested parties to ISMS. When you identify the list of interested parties, don't just note them, but also show the connection to ISMS. In 4.4, there is additional wording to emphasize the process interactions. This is especially important for multi-site certificates to demonstrate how the ISMS is distributed across various locations. As we all know, the management clauses 4 to 10 are mandatory and are audited throughout the audit cycle during the initial certification, surveillance cycles, and the recertification. Continuing the identification of changes in these clauses, this slide shows the changes to clause 6. In 6.1.3c, the revision includes removal of the word objectives and replacement of the word control with information security control. There are changes in the wording of 6.1.3d. There are changes made to improve physical security and to include data protection and cloud security. There are other changes such as use of the term staff in place of employee to include contractors and temporary staff such as interns. In 6.2, there are additions to emphasize monitoring and availability of documented information. A new section is introduced, 6.3, to address planning of changes. In 7.4, communication, the sub-bullets D and E have combined to ask for details of how you communicate. In 8.1, operational planning and control, more diverse language is being used, such as using the phrase externally provided processes in place of outsourced processes to be more inclusive of covering all the parties that may be working for you. In 9.1, the language has been modified to emphasize the effectiveness of ISMS through performance evaluation. In 9.2, internal audit, the requirements have been split into two subsections. The wording of the requirements remain more or less the same, so I do not see any changes in the implementation or auditing aspect of this requirement. In 9.3, management review requirements have been split into three subsections. One change is the addition of C to document the changes in the needs and expectations of interested parties. In 10, improvement, the requirements have been split into three subsections in place of two. Again, the wording of the requirement remains pretty much the same. There may be some reason for moving continual improvement to the top. It may be to emphasize that your PDCA cycle shows trending of improvement. So it may put more emphasis during the audits to show detailed objective evidence that demonstrates positive trends in ISMS improvement. With this slide, the review of the changes in the clauses is complete. The Annex A used to have 14 control categories, which have been reduced to 4 categories. The total number of controls are reduced from 114 to 93. There are 11 new controls, 24 controls that have been merged, and 58 controls that have some modification in them. In addition, as I mentioned before, attributes or purpose have been defined. You can choose to assign one of these 5 attributes to each control. This is designed to help with the implementation in many ways, including the identification of departments for various controls, or it may also help in ensuring that all of the appropriate controls are correctly assigned for risk treatment in your risk register. I want to point out that on top of the Annex A in 001 standard, there is a helpful reminder to consult with 002 document. 27002 has a good description of the attributes. Here's a summary. There are 4 categories defining 93 controls in the new Annex A, compared to the 14 categories defining 114 controls before. Here's the list of old and the new controls. Now look at the new controls first in next few slides. Here's the list of new controls introduced to keep up with the current best practices in information security. They fall into 3 of the 4 categories: organizational, physical, and technological controls. Next, let's look at the merged controls. This view of the merging is based on 002 reference document. It will help you to understand the transition of your ISMS documentation. Controls are merged for practical reasons. Some controls with clearly matched descriptions are merged together. Also, controls that are implemented and audited together for practical considerations are merged. For example, the first set, 5.1.1 and 5.1.2, policies for information security, and the review of the policies for information security are merged into 5.1, policies for information security. Let's look at another example, maybe the last set on this chart, 9.2.4, 9.3.1, and 9.4.3, all related to user authentication, are merged into 5.17, authentication information. Continuing with the list of the 24 merged controls, let's look at the top example, 9.2.2, 9.2.5, and 9.2.6. All are related to access provisioning, access rights. So they are merged into 5.18, access rights. Or let's look at the bottom example, 6.2.1, mobile device policy, and 11.2.8, unattended user equipment, are merged into 8.1, user endpoint devices. This is the last slide on the 24 merged controls to complete the list. You get the idea how this will simplify your documentation. Attributes of the Annex A controls make a new addition to the standard. There are 5 attributes that can be added to each controls. These attributes can have the listed corresponding values. The Annex A of the 002 document illustrates the use of attributes in detail. It is also noteworthy that you have the option of deciding which attributes you will use. You can use the tables from 27001 Annex B to map the controls between the two standards in an Excel document. If you create an Excel document, you can add the attributes that you want to assign to each control. Attributes can help you align the roles and responsibilities. or the departments within your organization to various controls. It can also help with the completion of control assignments in your risk treatment process. So no controls are missed in the treatment process. In the next few slides, I would like to point out how helpful the 002 document can be and how you can use it to make your upgrade easier. Just as the title of the 001 standard, the title of its reference document has cybersecurity and privacy protection added. This is just a couple of screen captures from Annex A of 27001, pointing to a reference in 27002. I would like to use the next few charts to show you the guidance on the new controls that is listed in the 002 reference. This is a brief summary of the guidance listed. There's more detail in 002. For example, for Annex A control A.5.7, threat intelligence, which happens to be a new control, the guidance begins with what is shown on this chart. Information about existing or emerging threats is collected and analyzed in order to facilitate informed actions to prevent the threats from causing harm to the organization, reduce the impact of such threats, and also it notes that there are different levels of threat intelligence: strategic, tactical, and operational. So for all of these controls, all of the new controls, I have the excerpts from the 27002 guidance in these charts. Another example we can take from this chart is the inclusion of information deletion. Previous version did not address the deletion of old information that is no longer needed. Now you have to show the consideration for information deletion. So the guidance for 8.10 explains that sensitive information should not be kept for longer than it is required to reduce the risk of undesirable disclosure. As I said, there's more information available for reference in 002. My charts show only selected information to make the point that 002 can answer your questions on what the new controls mean and how to implement them. Now the mapping. You have already implemented the 2013 version, and how can you make your job of transitioning easier? Again, I would like to point out that 27002 can help you map between the old and the new Annex A controls. The new addition of attributes is listed in table A.1 in the 002 document. It addresses the meaning of attributes, how they can be assigned to various controls, and detailed descriptions on how they can be used for effective implementation and in the auditing process. This document also provides two corresponding tables between the previous and the current version. This will help you in implementing the updates. There are two tables, table B.1 showing the backward correspondence and table B.2 showing the forward correspondence. However, if you put one or the other table in Excel, you can use it for reference in both ways. This is a larger view of the first page of the table B.1. See how they have indexed it in the first column for 27002 numbering. The table B.2 provides the correspondence of controls from 2013 to 2022. This is a larger view of the first page of the table B.2. Note how they have indexed it for the 2013 edition of the standard. Now let me address the questions about the timeline to upgrade. The accreditation bodies are working on rulemaking right now. The rulemaking covers how certification bodies can audit the new standard. So the accreditation bodies such as ANAB or DAX have 6 months of rulemaking time for the conformity assessment bodies or certification bodies such as DQS. And that timer started at the publication of this standard in October 2022. Rulemaking covers the requirements on audit report, audit documentation, training of our auditors, and qualification, and others. After this rulemaking period is over, the certification bodies or conformity assessment bodies can take 6 months to implement the new rules. But in practice, we will be ready earlier. So examples of these documents include our internal procedures, audit time calculation methods, audit report template or tool changes, certificate templates, training of our auditors and technical reviewers, and all the support staff. On the bottom right of this chart, I have a red border showing the total duration of the transition period. So all of the certified clients must transition within the next 36 months from the last day of the publication. So from October 2022, 36 months is October 2025. That is the total definition of the time period. Now all certification upgrades must be completed roughly a few months before that because there's a blackout period at the end. Now you may see some more changes coming in, other changes that will not affect the timeline that was discussed in the previous slide. For example, the first bullet on this chart has an example of table of contents correction. The newly released 27001 standard body shows a new clause 6.3 that has been introduced, but the table of contents failed to capture it. So they may have to release a corrected version at some point. So if you hear the announcement of new updates to the standard, those will be minor changes and the timeline will not change. Also, other standards may have to be updated to accommodate the changes in 27001, such as 27701, Privacy Information Management Systems, 27017, Cloud Services, 27018, Security Techniques, 27006, which lays out the requirements for certification bodies. They may have some minor changes coming up. So further in the next two charts, I have timeline for currently certified organizations as well as organizations seeking the certification for the first time. In this chart, let's look at currently certified organization. As we saw earlier, the upgrade audits can begin after all the rulemaking and the implementations have completed. So upgrade audits may begin during second half of 2023. By upgrade audits, I mean transitioning from the 2013 version to 2022 version. You have up to 3 years from the publication of the new standard to complete the upgrade, as we saw in the previous chart. Typically, the last 2 to 3 months of this period are treated as blackout period to make the transition easier at the end. So July 2025 is a realistic deadline to complete the upgrade audit and conform to the new edition. Upgrade audits can be completed during surveillance or recertification cycle, with the minimum time added to assess the upgrade. Or a separate upgrade audit can be scheduled if that is more convenient. When the certificate is updated, because the client has successfully completed the separate transition audit, the expiration of the current certification cycle will not change. Continuing on the currently certified organizations, the upgrade audit will include the verification of a gap analysis for 2022 edition, changes to the client's ISMS, the statement of applicability update, updates to the risk treatment, and verification of implementation and effectiveness of the new and changed clauses and controls. Now, for the organizations seeking new or first-time certifications, new certifications audit for 2022 edition may begin during the second half of 2023. On the other hand, after October of 2023, no new certifications will be issued against the old version. Now, how would you approach your transition audit? Please use these charts for your overall understanding. I will also be scheduling meetings with different existing clients to make detailed plans on this transition approach, and then communicate with the DQS customer service to schedule the audits. It's important to note that failure to upgrade within the timeline that was discussed would result in loss of the ISO 27001 certification and that of any add-on certifications. My suggested approach would be to begin by purchasing the ISO 27001 and 27002 documents. Use the mapping tables as we saw in these charts to create an Excel mapping sheet, add attributes. Use this information to update your statement of applicability, risk register, and implementation of the new controls. Identify the changes that would be needed for your controls, policies, processes to accommodate the changes in the standard. Of course, document the appropriate objective evidence as you had done before. Then conduct a readiness assessment, perform a gap remediation of all the gaps identified, complete internal audit and management review, and then schedule the upgrade audits with DQS. Of course, anytime if you have any questions, it's easy to connect with DQS. Please feel free to reach out to Ravi, who is also on this call, for any communication on your IT certifications. Next up, I would like to invite Beth Gatewood of DQS Academy to share this exciting news about us launching a DQS training academy.
Thank you
Beth,
very
are you
much,
on the
Sandy.
call?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for handing this over to me. Thank you everyone for coming to this today and listening to us talk about this new upgraded standard. One of the additional things that DQS has been offering starting in Q3 of this year is that we have an academy now to help you with training 2 different ISO standards. Our currently available trainings are for ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and the previous standard of 27001, which we're all talking about today. We also have some food standards, which are available and accredited through BRC. But our ISO courses mostly focus on 3 different courses. Our live instructor courses, which are for our ISO standards, give a variety of options to meet your current needs for these standards, with upcoming courses for TISAX and ISO 20000-1 in Q1 of next year. Our courses cover 3 stages of a standard implementation. The executive overview is a 4-hour course that gives an overview of the structure and requirement of the selected management system, explains relevant key terms and definitions, and reviews the high-level structure to give you a launching point to start your journey. Our 2-day implementation course is the next step and goes further into depth on the overview of the structure and requirements of the standard to help you gain an understanding on how to implement it based on ISO guidelines. Well, finally, once you have your management system up and running, our internal auditor course is available to prepare your employees on how to audit your system against the standards by covering the structure and requirements from an auditing perspective and how to effectively conduct your internal audits. We're also looking into some blended options for self-paced e-learning with supporting instructor-led sessions, as well as entirely self-paced e-learning coming up in the next year. If you have any interest, we have both public and private options. For our public classes, you can go to the dqsacademy.com site, and we have our full catalog that you can self-register for any courses. If, however, you're interested in private courses or are looking for registering a group of users, please go to our dqsglobal.com site and submit a request, and we will work with you to help you get registered for these courses. Back to you, Sandeep. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Beth. All right, so remaining are the polls in the questions and answer session. So before we go to the questions, I would like to launch just a couple of polls, 3 polls maybe, and gather some feedback for our next webinars so that we can provide more valuable webinars to you. All right, I hope you can see the first poll. It talks about the utility of this webinar, and if it's useful, then we will definitely repeat this webinar with more information as rulemaking progresses. Okay, thank you for participating in this one. Allow me to share the next poll with you. It would be very helpful for us to know if you have more questions that you would like to send to DQS. Ravi and I will be very happy to communicate via emails and answer specific questions that you may want to share via emails. All right, thank you. I am sharing the results for this poll. We have at least 14 people on the call who would like to communicate via email. So we will definitely be looking forward to your emails and responding with the appropriate information. The last question in the polls is about what other certifications you might be considering. So I would like to gather some information on your plans for 2023. Maybe it would include TISAX or Privacy Information Management System. All right, thank you, everybody. That concludes all the questions I had, and I thank you for participating in the polls. Now we can begin the questions and answers session. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box or please speak. I will try to unmute everybody.
Sandeep, we've had two questions about the slides. Will the slides be available for reference for the attendees?
Certainly, yes. I will make a PDF copy of this slide available to you, Sarah, and you can post it on our website, please.
Okay, sounds good. And then if anyone has any other questions, please submit them. We did get one more, Sandeep. Is there any impact on the effort days in the new standard since controls have come down?
That's a very good question. After the rulemaking is communicated by the accreditation bodies, we will definitely update our audit time calculation methods, and there may or may not be any change in audit time. I do not have enough information to answer that question right now, but it's the calculation of audit time is based on the headcount of the organization and the complexity of the business and the IT infrastructure. The number of Annex A controls do impact the remote locations audit time a little bit, but with such a minor change, I do not anticipate a whole lot of change in the calculation of audit time.
Okay. Will there be any guidance provided by our auditor for preparing us to upgrade during this year's audit activities?
I'm sorry, Sarah. Read again, please.
Sure. Will there be any guidance provided by our auditor for preparing us to upgrade during this year's audit activities?
Yes, so for all of our clients, I will be communicating with them to set up individual meetings so that we can discuss their plans and help answer questions about the preparation and plan the audits accordingly.
Has DQS purchased ISO 27001 2022, and when will it be available to us? Only ISO 27002 2022 is on the DQS database.
I will inquire about that again. A copy should be available on the external documents page, and um, I will communicate to you separately where it is available.
Okay. Are there any available 27,001 2022 certification courses available? I think that's a question for Beth.
That's a very good question. So as Beth had said, we will be offering courses next year that can be used for 27001 update certification, and we will
Certainly,
be able to issue certificates on that.
Sandeep, if I could hop in for just a moment.
Please and thank you.
Yeah, so the version 2022 courses are not currently available, but they are in plan for next year so that you have it available at the start of the upgrade process in the second half of this year.
Okay, and the current last question right now is, if we do the upgrade audit as part of a surveillance audit, how many more additional days do we need to consider for covering the upgrade audit?
That's a very good question, and thank you for asking that. At this time, I cannot really tell you an exact number because it will vary from client to client. And we may want to implement it in two stages. Once the rule making is complete by the accreditation body, we will know more details. But it would be very helpful to have it in two stages. In stage one, we would just look at your documentation so that we know that you're ready for the upgrade audit, and that will make the upgrade audit easier and shorter.
And that's the last question for now. Are there any other questions? We have one more. Upgrade options for existing lead auditors of ISO 27001 2013 version.
Right. So as far as the standard summary goes, these charts can be used for understanding of the auditors. And once we have updated our internal documentation and processes, I would have another webinar for our auditors so that we can all be on the same page on how to audit it. So it would be a two-stage training process for the auditors.
Okay, it looks like that's all we have.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I truly appreciate your support in making this a success. And I thank all the participants for joining and asking very pertinent questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good day.